I reckon y'all are in for a wild ride with this here tale. It all started about 17 years back when me and the Mrs. Jolene bought ourselves a nice little fixer-upper. Little did we know our neighbor Cruella was a real piece of bitch. Now, Cruella had herself a big old chunk of land not too far from the lake. Folks round here got money, but ain't nobody as loaded as them hoity-toity folks living right on the water. Anyway, Cruella decides to divvy up her property for her young'uns when they got grown. Her daughter Jessie turned out all right, considering. But her boy J.R., boy, he was a real troublemaker. Cruella built Jessie and J.R. houses on their pieces of land, just how they wanted. Then on the last bit of property, she went and put up a little convenience store. I reckon she gave 'em the deeds to their houses to keep the peace, you know. Well, J.R. was a real party animal. He'd throw these ragers almost every dang night, keeping the whole neighborhood up with his shenanigans. Cops were out there so much, they probably had a special unit just for him. Didn't help that Mama Cruella paid all his bills. Water, electric, trash, you name it. She had everything in her name, except for one thing: the property tax. See, since JR's name was on the deed, he was supposed to pay it. But that dang fool just ignored it. So when the cops showed up and hauled JR off to the slammer, weren't nobody surprised. But then the house went up for auction and hooey, was it a mess? Holes in the walls, floor caved in, kitchen needed gutting, the works. JR's wild ways left it in shambles. That's when Billy Bob comes into the picture. He's one of them house flippers, but not the rich kind. He's more of a bootstraps kind of fella, doing the work himself and flipping 'em for a modest profit. Well, Billy Bob snaps up JR's dump for a steal, figuring he can fix it up nice. Meanwhile, Cruella's madder than a wet hen that her boy's in jail and she's out of house. She comes stomping over to Billy Bob, demanding he give her the house back. Can you believe the nerve of that woman? Billy Bob tries to reason with her, even offers to sell it for what he paid. But no, Cruella ain't having none of that. So she sicks her highfalutin lawyer on him, trying to claim the house was wrongly sold. But see, Cruella made a big mistake handing over that deed. It was JR's responsibility, and he dropped the ball. The county wasn't about to let her off the hook for the back taxes neither. In the end, the judge threw out her case. Billy Bob fixed up the house real nice and sold it to me and Jolene for a pretty penny. We've been living here happy as clams ever since. As for Cruella, well, karma's a you-know-what. Turns out, she'd been cutting corners on that little store of hers. Health inspector came by and found all sorts of violations. They shut her down and slapped her with a $200,000 fine. Last I heard, she's living in a trailer down by the river, still spitting mad about the whole thing. I tell ya, some folks just don't know when to quit. But I reckon that's what you get when you think you're above the law and don't give a dang about nobody but yourself. Me and Jolene, we just keep our heads down, work hard, and treat folks right. That's the key to a happy life, if you ask me. So me and Jolene, we're fixin' to buy this here house from Billy Bob. We figure it's perfect for us. Right size, right neighborhood, and just a stone's throw from the lake where we love to fish and boat. Only thing is, we're a mite worried about the price since it ain't listed on the website yet. We decide to swing by and have ourselves a look-see. Lo and behold, there's Billy Bob working away on the place. We stop to shoot the breeze with him, real friendly-like. He appreciates the company, and we get to talking about maybe buying the place as is for a fair price, seeing as how he's already got it half fixed up. Billy Bob says he's obliged, but he's already got some other folks interested, and he ain't comfortable selling to us direct. Says we can buy it at full price when he's done. We thank him kindly and leave our number, just in case he changes his mind. Well, wouldn't you know it, not even 2 weeks later, Billy Bob gives us a holler. Turns out his sister's taken ill in another state and he needs to go be with her. He ain't got the time or patience to finish the house now. Says it ain't up to code yet, but if we can find a way to buy it, he'll sell it to us for a good price. We jump at the chance and start hustling to find a bank that'll give us a loan. Our realtor buddy helps us out and we find one that'll do it, but with a catch. We gotta get the house up to code in 2 weeks or they could take it back and auction it off. We tell Billy Bob the situation and he's real helpful. Can't do the work himself 'cause he's in a rush, but he tells us exactly what needs doing to meet code, how long it'll take, and how much it'll cost. He even helps us out by letting us borrow double what he's asking for the house. We take that extra money and use it for fixing up the place. Turns out, with the work Billy Bob already put in, the house is darn close to passing code. We could have probably done it ourselves, but just to be safe, we call up some pals and knock it out in no time. Of course, even with it up to code, there's still a heap of work to be done. We spend months on end replacing floors, rewiring the electric, patching holes, and scraping off this god-awful moldy wallpaper that's stuck right to the drywall. It's a big old job, but we pour our hearts into it. Meanwhile, Cruella's still raising Cain about her stolen house. She's over there throwing a hissy fit, calling the cops and the mayor, and Lord knows who else, trying to get 'em to take the house from us. But it ain't no use. The house is ours, fair and square, and there ain't nothing she can do about it. Well, one day Jolene's out in the yard minding her own business, when Cruella comes a-storming over, madder'n a hornet. She starts laying into Jolene, calling her all sorts of nasty names and saying we stole her house. Jolene, bless her heart, just lets her rant and rave till she tuckers herself out. When Cruella finally stops to catch her breath, Jolene looks her square in the eye and says, "Now listen here, Missy. We bought this house fair and legal. Ain't nobody stole nothing from you. Your boy done messed up and lost it his own self. So you best get off my property before I call the sheriff and have you hauled off for trespassing." Well, Cruella's face turns beet red, and she looks like she's about to explode. But she knows Jolene ain't bluffing, so she turns tail and stomps off, cussing up a blue streak the whole way. That was the last time Cruella ever set foot on our land. She still glares daggers at us whenever she sees us in town, but she ain't dumb enough to start nothing. She learned her lesson the hard way. And that, my friends, is the story of how me and Jolene came to own our little slice of paradise, despite the neighbor from hell. Just goes to show, if you work hard and do right by folks, good things'll come your way. Even if you gotta deal with a few Cruellas along the way, so we finally get the house fixed up enough to move in. It ain't perfect, but it's ours, and we're darn proud of it. We're still hauling boxes when who should come a-knockin' but Cruella herself. At first she's all sweetness and light, welcoming us to the neighborhood. But then she drops a bombshell on us. Says the house is actually hers and we got 30 days to vamoose. Claims she feels right sorry for us, getting scammed like that. But the house ain't ours, and Billy Bob had no right selling it. Well, let me tell you, our hearts just about stopped. We'd poured our blood, sweat, and tears into this place, not to mention a heap of money. The thought of losing it all 'cause of some scammer made us sick to our stomachs. We thanked Cruella for letting us know and said we'd get it all sorted out. First thing we did was call the bank. They confirmed Billy Bob was the rightful owner. Then we talked to the realtor, who said the same dang thing. Even Billy Bob himself told us Cruella and her kin had been harassing him non-stop since he bought it, claiming he stole it. We trudged up to the courthouse, and sure enough, there was our name on the deed, plain as day. While we were there, we heard the whole sordid story about JR losing the house 'cause he couldn't be bothered to pay his taxes. Not long after, Cruella comes sniffing around again, asking when we're gonna clear out. We told her polite as can be that we ain't going nowhere. The house is ours, bought and paid for, and it ain't our fault her boy lost it. Well, that set her off on a real sob story about how the property had been in her family for generations, and losing it was just tearing her up inside. She started in on how Billy Bob stole it out from under 'em, while they was all upset about JR getting thrown in the clink. We asked her why they didn't just buy it back at auction if it meant so dang much to 'em. Heck, we got it from Billy Bob for a measly 50 grand, and he still made a profit after all the work he put in. They could have snatched it up for a song, but no. Cruella just kept moaning about how it was being stolen and she wasn't about to pay for what was rightfully hers. Now we felt bad for her, we really did. Losing family land ain't no small thing, but we couldn't just hand over a house we'd poured our hearts and souls into. We'd be out 50 grand to Billy Bob, another 30 grand in materials, and months of back-breaking labor. No way, no how. But we ain't heartless. We offered to sell it to Cruella for a cool 100 grand. Considering the location and all the work we put in, that was a steal. The place was easily worth twice that on the market. Did Cruella jump at the chance to get her precious family home back? Nope. She just got madder than a wet hen and started sputtering about how we were trying to cheat her. Said she shouldn't have to pay a dime for what was hers by right. Jolene, bless her, kept her cool. She looked old Cruella right in the eye and said, "Ma'am, I know you're hurtin', but the fact is, this house ain't yours no more. Your boy lost it fair and square. Now, we're offering you a heck of a deal to get it back. But if you ain't interested, there's the door. We got a lot of work to do." Cruella looked fit to be tied, but she knew she was licked. She stomped off in a huff, promising she'd make us sorry. But we just went on about our business, putting the finishing touches on our new home sweet home. And that, my friends, is the story of our first run-in with the Wicked Witch of the West. It wasn't the last time she'd darken our doorstep, but we held our ground. This was our little piece of the American dream, and we weren't about to let anyone, least of all a spiteful old biddy like Cruella, take it away from us. Well, Cruella didn't take too kindly to our generous offer. She shot back with a low ball of 40 grand, saying she shouldn't have to pay a red cent for what was rightfully hers. We tried to meet her halfway, offering to knock it down to 90 grand if she wanted to negotiate. But no, she just got even more riled up. She had the nerve to say she'd be doing us a favor by throwing in an extra 10 grand for all the work we put in, like we should be grateful for her charity. When we told her we paid Billy Bob 50 grand for the place, she called us liars and thieves, said there was no way this dump was worth that much. That was the last straw for us. Ain't nobody gonna insult our home after all the blood, sweat, and money we poured into it. We told Cruella to get off our property and never come back. Said we wouldn't sell to her if she offered double the market value. She stomped off cussing and hollering, calling us every name in the book. Later, we found out she'd been spreading all sorts of lies about us in the neighborhood, telling folks we stole the house from her and who knows what else. At first, we just ignored it. Figured no one would be dumb enough to believe her tall tales. But then some fella comes roaring up our driveway, waving a gun and telling us to clear out. We'd never laid eyes on him before, but we'd heard talk of him. Folks called him the Peacekeeper. Said he kept the neighborhood in line, dealing with troublemakers and such. In our neck of the woods, a lot of folks appreciated having someone like that around, seeing as the cops weren't always too quick to respond. Now we live right on the edge of the quiet side of town, where all the retired folks are. But just a mile or so of woods and farmland over, you got the rowdier bunch. The type that ain't too keen on law and order, if you catch my drift. Anyway, we figured this Peacekeeper fella might be more reasonable than he looked, so we invited him in for a beer and a chat. Told him to bring his gun if it made him feel better, but we'd be packing heat too. Round here, damn near everyone's got a firearm or three. More gun stores than dollar stores, matter of fact. So a man with a gun don't ruffle too many feathers, long as he ain't pointing it at you. We sat down with this Peacekeeper and laid it all out for him. Told him the whole story, start to finish. After a few hours and more than a few beers, he started seeing the light. Apologized for coming in hot, and said he got caught up in Cruella's web of lies. Promised it wouldn't happen again. He even thanked us for buying the place. Said when JR was living there, he got nothing but complaints. Folks hollering about loud music at all hours. Drunk teenagers stumbling down the middle of the road, nearly getting run over. Sounded like a real nightmare. Well, that was all the confirmation we needed that we'd done right by the neighborhood when we bought this house. We shook the Peacekeeper's hand and sent him on his way with a friendly warning not to believe everything Cruella said. After that, things settled down some. Cruella was still running her mouth, but most folks knew better than to put much stock in her jawing. We just kept our heads down, minded our own business, and kept working on turning our house into a home. But Jolene, she couldn't quite let it go. She'd always been the type to stand up to bullies, and Cruella was the biggest bully on the block. So one day she marched herself over to Cruella's tacky mansion and rang the bell. When Cruella answered, Jolene gave her a piece of her mind, told her in no uncertain terms to quit spreading lies and keep our names out of her mouth. Said if she kept it up, we'd be forced to take legal action for slander and harassment. Well, you should have seen the look on Cruella's face. She sputtered and fumed, but she knew Jolene wasn't bluffing. My girl is as tough as nails when she needs to be. From that day on, Cruella pretty much left us alone. Oh, she still glared daggers at us whenever we ran into her in town, but she kept her trap shut. I guess even a bitter old witch like her knows when she's beat. And that, my friends, is how we defended our little slice of the American dream against the neighborhood nutjob. It wasn't always easy, but we held our ground and came out on top. Just goes to show, when you're in the right, ain't nothing can keep you down for long. Not even a crazy lady with an axe to grind. All right, let me pick up where we left off. So, like I said, Cruella had herself a little convenience store on her property. It was the only game in town for miles, so folks didn't have much choice but to shop there, even if the prices were sky high and the service was lousy. I mean, the most you could expect was a grudging thank you as you walked out the door. Oh, and maybe a refund if you were lucky enough to find mold on your bread before you ate it. Real top-notch establishment, let me tell you. But see, that store was Cruella's pride and joy. It was what gave her so much clout in the neighborhood. Folks might have thought she was a few fries short of a Happy Meal, but they weren't about to risk getting on her bad side and losing their only nearby place to buy milk and eggs. So when she started spreading rumors about me and Jolene, people tended to listen. Now, the whole stealing her house thing was too crazy even for the biggest gossips to believe, but Cruella had plenty of other nasty little tales to tell. Most of it was just petty nonsense, and considering some of the characters in our neck of the woods, even if it were all true, it would have barely raised an eyebrow. But folks started giving us a wide berth all the same. No one wanted to be seen fraternizing with Cruella's enemies. They just left us to ourselves, which suited us just fine. We had more important things to worry about than a bunch of busybodies and their small-town drama. A few years went by, and guess who comes slinking back into town? None other than good old JR himself, fresh out of the clink. And of course, Mommy Dearest couldn't bear to have her precious boy living under her roof again. So she set him up in a little apartment above the store and put him to work behind the register. Well, it didn't take long for JR to start up his old tricks. Jolene and I noticed he was double-charging folks for their purchases and pocketing the difference. We even caught him at it a few times and made him give us a refund. He always claimed the register was on the fritz, but we knew better. Now Jolene and I may have had our differences with Cruella, but we didn't want to see her business go down the tubes on account of her no-good son's sticky fingers. So we did the neighborly thing and told her what he was up to. You'd think she might have been grateful for the heads up, right? But no. Cruella being Cruella, she got all huffy and accused us of trying to sabotage her store with wild accusations. Said her sweet baby boy would never do such a thing, and how dare we suggest otherwise. We just rolled our eyes and let it go. If she wanted to turn a blind eye to her son's thieving ways, that was her problem. We'd done our good deed for the day. But here's where the story takes a bit of a turn. See, Cruella's store may have been popular with the locals, but it turns out it wasn't too popular with the health inspector. Seems all those moldy groceries and questionable meat were catching up to her. One day, a big old official-looking van pulls up out front, and a bunch of guys in suits come piling out. They march into the store with their clipboards and start poking around, making all sorts of disapproving noises. Cruella's just about beside herself, fluttering around them like a nervous hen, trying to explain away all the violations. But it's no use. The inspector slaps her with a list of citations a mile long and tells her she's got 30 days to get the place up to code, or they'll shut her down for good. And to add insult to injury, they hand her a whopping big fine to pay on top of it all. Well, you can imagine the wailing and gnashing of teeth that followed. Cruella was fit to be tied. She started ranting to anyone who would listen about how the health department was out to get her, how it was all a big conspiracy, yada yada. But the truth was, she had no one to blame but herself. She'd been cutting corners and letting things slide for years, and now it was coming back to bite her in the behind. Not that she would ever admit that, of course. No. In Cruella's mind, this was all somehow my and Jolene's fault. She got it into her head that we'd reported her to the health department as revenge for all the nasty rumors she'd spread about us. As if we had nothing better to do than go around tattling on her shoddy business practices. But that's the funny thing about karma. It has a way of catching up to folks, even if they're too blind to see it. And Cruella was about to get a heaping helping of cosmic justice, whether she liked it or not. All right, so let me get this straight. After we tried to warn Cruella about her no-good son skimming cash from the register, She had the nerve to tell us to screw off. Nice as you please. Well, we figured if that's the way she wanted to play it, fine by us. We washed our hands of the whole mess. But you know how gossip spreads in a small town. Pretty soon word got around about what JR was up to. Folks started keeping a closer eye on their receipts. And sure enough, they started noticing the same funny business we had. Now, Mr. Peacekeeper, he wasn't too happy about all the rumors flying. He came by our place again, all friendly-like, and told us point-blank to knock it off. Said he'd talked to Cruella and JR, and they claimed it was just a misunderstanding. Something about the register being on the fritz. We knew it was a load of hooey, but what could we do? Mr. Peacekeeper had a soft spot for Cruella and her kin, and he wasn't about to take our word over theirs, so we just smiled and nodded and promised to keep our trap shut from then on. But here's the thing about karma. It's got a way of catching up to folks, even when you least expect it. And Cruella and JR, well, they were about to get a heaping helping of what was coming to them. See, their little convenience store may have been the only game in town, but that didn't mean folks had to like it. And the more people started paying attention, the more they realized they were getting fleeced every time they walked through those doors. It all came to a head one day when Mr. Peacekeeper himself finally put two and two together. And let me tell you, he was fit to be tied. Jolene and I could hear him hollering at JR and Cruella from clear across the way, giving them what for like you wouldn't believe. It was music to our ears. I'll tell you that much. After all the grief those two had given us, it was damn satisfying to see them get a taste of their own medicine. But that was just the beginning. Mr. Peacekeeper, he didn't stop with just chewing them out. No, sir. He went door to door, telling every last soul in the neighborhood exactly what kind of shenanigans Cruella and her boy had been pulling. He made sure everyone knew the truth about what was going on in that store. Well, you can imagine the uproar that caused. Folks were madder than wet hens, feeling like they'd been played for fools all this time. And Cruella, she just kept digging herself in deeper, trying to blame everyone but herself for her troubles. She even had the gall to march over to our place and accuse us of turning the whole town against her, as if we had that kind of power. We just laughed in her face and told her she'd made her own bed, and now she could lie in it. But the real kicker came a few days later, when a big old van from the health department came rolling up to Cruella's store. Turns out, all those complaints about moldy bread and rotten meat had finally caught up to her. The inspectors went through that place with a fine-toothed comb, and they didn't like what they found. Not one bit. They slapped Cruella with so many violations it made your head spin. And to top it all off, they handed her a whopping big fine to pay. You should have heard the caterwauling coming from that woman. You'd think the world was ending, the way she carried on. But the truth was, she had no one to blame but herself. She'd been cutting corners and letting things slide for years, and now it was time to pay the piper. The last we heard, Cruella was frantically trying to get the store cleaned up and back in shape before the health department came back for a follow-up. She even fired JR and banned him from the premises, trying to show she meant business. But it was too little, too late. The damage was done and her reputation was in tatters. Folks started driving into town to do their shopping, even if it was less convenient. They just couldn't stomach the thought of giving Cruella one more penny of their hard-earned money. As for me and Jolene, we just sat back and watched the whole thing unfold with a kind of grim satisfaction. It was like the universe had finally decided to balance the scales and give Cruella a heaping dose of her own medicine. And you know what? It couldn't have happened to a nastier woman. Karma's funny that way. You can run from it for a while, but sooner or later it always catches up to you. And when it does, hoo boy, you better watch out. But that's the way the cookie crumbles, I guess. In the end, Cruella brought it all on herself with her lying, cheating ways. And as for JR, well, last I heard he was living in a rusty old trailer down by the river, still trying to swindle folks out of their cash. Some people just never learn, I suppose. But that's not my problem anymore. Jolene and I, we just keep on keeping on, minding our own business and enjoying our little slice of heaven here in the countryside. It may not be perfect, but it's ours. And after all the blood, sweat, and tears we put into making it a home, you can bet your bottom dollar we'll fight tooth and nail to keep it that way. Come hell or high water, or nosy neighbors with too much time on their hands. But that's just life in a small town, I reckon. You take the good with the bad, and you keep putting one foot in front of the other. Because at the end of the day, that's all any of us can really do. And if you're lucky, you might just find a little piece of happiness along the way. Even if you have to deal with a few Cruellas and JRs to get there. That's just the price of living, I suppose. But it's worth it, in the end. It's always worth it. All right, so let me get this straight. Mr. Peacekeeper, the most trusted man in the neighborhood, goes on a one-man crusade to expose Cruella and JR's shady dealings at the store. He's got receipts and everything, literally showing folks the proof of how they've been getting cheated all this time. Well, you can imagine how fast the shit hit the fan after that. Within 24 hours, Cruella's little empire came crashing down around her ears. All her loyal customers, the ones who'd been keeping her afloat all these years, they just up and vanished. Poof, gone. Like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Oh sure, she still had the seasonal folks, the tourists and snowbirds who didn't know any better. But once winter rolled around and those crowds dried up, Cruella was in a world of hurt. She was hemorrhaging money left and right, trying to keep that store running. Finally, after a couple of brutal winters, she had to throw in the towel. Started closing up shop when the cold weather hit, just to stop the bleeding. But even that wasn't enough to save her. The cost of restocking the shelves every spring was just too damn high. 3 years of that, and she was done for. Shuttered the place for good and slunk off with her tail between her legs. It was a sight to see, let me tell you. And wouldn't you know it, with Cruella's fall from grace, folks started looking at me and Jolene in a whole new light. Suddenly we weren't the neighborhood pariahs anymore. People actually wanted to be our friends, invite us over for barbecues and whatnot. It was a nice change of pace, I'll tell you that much. Not having to work so hard just to get folks to acknowledge our existence. Felt like we could finally breathe a little easier, you know? But of course, Cruella being Cruella, she wasn't about to let us enjoy our newfound popularity in peace. No, sir. She had to stick her nose in our business every chance she got. I swear that woman must have had binoculars permanently glued to her face. Anytime Jolene or I set foot outside, there she was, watching our every move like a hawk. It was downright creepy is what it was. We'd be out there minding our own beeswax, maybe pulling some weeds or walking the dog, and here comes Cruella, finding some excuse to be in her yard at the same time. It was like she couldn't stand the thought of us having a moment's peace. Now, don't get me wrong. We're not the type to be bothered by a nosy neighbor. But there's a line, you know, and Cruella had pole vaulted right over it and kept on running. It got to the point where we couldn't even enjoy our own backyard without feeling her beady little eyes on us. And forget about relaxing by the pool in our swimsuits. The last thing we wanted was Cruella ogling us like a couple of prize hogs at the county fair. So we started talking about putting up a privacy fence. Nothing fancy, just something to give us a little bit of a buffer from Cruella's prying eyes. And because we're gluttons for punishment, we actually went and told her about our plans just to be neighborly. Well, you'd think we'd just announced our intention to build a nuclear waste dump in her petunias, the way she carried on, screeching about her property values and her view and Lord knows what else. You'd think we were personally attacking her by wanting a little privacy. But here's the kicker. When we went down to the courthouse to get a copy of our property deed, just to make sure we knew where our boundaries were, we got one hell of a surprise. Turns out, Cruella had been helping herself to a big old chunk of our land for years. Had a shed and a garden and everything right there on our property like she owned the place. Now, our plot's not your typical square box like you might see in the city. It's more of a wonky trapezoid, with a little triangle bit cut out by a line of trees. Weird, I know, but that's just how they do things out here in the sticks. Anyway, according to the deed and the property map, that little triangle was 100% ours. But Cruella, she just decided to claim everything on the other side of those trees for herself. Bold as brass, like squatters' rights were a thing. When we called her out on it, boy howdy, you should have heard her holler, calling us liars and thieves, like we were the ones trying to steal land out from under her. The nerve of that woman, I swear. But we had the paperwork to back us up, and she knew it. She knew she'd been caught red-handed, trying to pull a fast one on us all these years. And let me tell you, she did not like being called out on her bullshit. Not one little bit. All right, so you're telling me that even though Cruella was caught red-handed squatting on your land, she still had the gall to act like the victim? Man, the delusion is strong with that one. You tried to be reasonable, offering to sell her the disputed property or even trade it for a bit of hers that would make your life easier. But no, Cruella wasn't having any of that. She just kept screeching about how you stole from her, like a broken record. And so began the property war to end all property wars. You'd think, with Cruella being the one who divvied up the land in the first place, it would be a pretty open and shut case. But oh no, nothing's ever that simple, is it? See, out here in the boonies, property lines are about as clear as mud. You've got deeds that are older than dirt, using landmarks that might as well be ancient hieroglyphics. From the big oak to the mossy rock by the creek, my ass. Half those trees probably got chopped down a century ago, and the creek's gone and dried up. It's no wonder folks are always squabbling over who owns what around here. And with land prices being what they are, even a tiny slice of dirt can be worth a pretty penny. So the state, in its infinite wisdom, decided to crack down on all these property disputes. They brought the hammer down on surveyors, making damn sure they didn't even think about fudging the numbers. Get caught giving a bad survey even by accident? Who, boy, you're in for a world of hurt. Hefty fines, lost licenses, the whole shebang. And that's just for starters. You've got to go back and tell every single client you've had for the past decade that you screwed the pooch. Every last one of them gets a do-over on your dime. And if they find out you messed up their property lines, get ready to open up that checkbook, buddy. It's even worse if they catch you taking bribes or getting blackmailed. Then all that money you made under the table comes flying right back out, plus interest. And you can bet your bottom dollar the poor sap who greased your palm is going to be in the hot seat, too. So with all that hanging over their heads, surveyors around here are jumpier than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. They won't touch a property dispute with a 10-foot pole, not if they can help it. Which meant, when the shit hit the fan with Cruella, it wasn't as easy as just ringing up a surveyor and getting them to settle things. No, sir. That would have been too damn convenient. Nope. We had to jump through more hoops than a circus lion just to get someone out here to take a look. And even then, they were twitchier than a whore in church, looking over their shoulder every 5 seconds like they expected Cruella to come charging out of the bushes with a shotgun. Not that I blame them, really. That woman is nuttier than a fruitcake, and twice as mean. I wouldn't put it past her to try and strong-arm some poor surveyor into fudging the numbers in her favor. But lucky for us, the guy we got was as honest as the day is long. He took one look at our deed and the property map, then went out and marked off our boundaries with enough little flags to start our own miniature golf course. And wouldn't you know it, every last one of those flags was right where we said they should be. That little triangle of land was ours fair and square. Cruella didn't have a leg to stand on, and she knew it. Of course, that didn't stop her from pitching a fit that could have woken the dead. She was out there screeching and flapping her arms like a demented chicken, spitting mad that she'd been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. But what could she do? The law was on our side, and she couldn't bully or bribe her way out of it. For once in her miserable life, Cruella had to face the consequences of her own actions. And let me tell you, it was a thing of beauty to behold. Watching that old battle-axe get her comeuppance after all the hell she'd put us through. It was like Christmas and my birthday all rolled into one. But we didn't let it go to our heads. We're not petty like that. Once the surveyor packed up his gear and hit the road, we just went about our business like usual. Put up our fence, tended our garden, enjoyed our little slice of paradise. And Cruella, well, she sulked and seethed and made our lives as miserable as she could for a while. But in the end, even she had to accept the new status quo. She lost, we won. And that was all there was to it. Of course, that didn't stop her from being a grade-A pain in the ass at every opportunity. But that's just Cruella for you. Some dogs can't change their spots, no matter how many times they get smacked with a newspaper. Oh boy, just when you thought things couldn't get any messier, Cruella goes and pulls a fast one with that surveyor. I'd bet my bottom dollar she greased his palm, but good to get him to fudge the numbers in her favor. Except, It seems like she didn't quite think it through all the way. Forgot to mention that little detail about your property line being a hair's breadth from her front porch. Oh, I bet that stuck in her craw something fierce when she realized. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Every time you try to get a legit surveyor out to your place, there's Cruella, sidling up to them like a snake in the grass, dropping hints about property disputes and making them more nervous than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Can't say I blame them for running for the hills. With the kind of heat they could catch for even a tiny mistake, it's no wonder they're gun-shy. And of course, Cruella's more than happy to fan those flames. Anything to keep you from getting a fair shake. Oh, and let's not forget about those missing property markers. The ones that just up and vanished into thin air before you even set foot in the place. Gee, I wonder who could have had a hand in that little disappearing act. Surely not our dear sweet Cruella. Perish the thought. So now you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You can't get a surveyor to touch your land with a 10-foot pole. Not without shelling out an arm and a leg. And even then, it's a crapshoot whether they'll actually follow through, what with Cruella breathing down their necks. But you're not giving up, no, sir. You're squirreling away every spare penny, bound and determined to get to the bottom of this whole mess. And that's where things really came to a head, just a few short months ago. There was one hell of a storm that blew through. The kind that makes you wonder if the good Lord's got a bone to pick with somebody. And wouldn't you know it, one of the trees on that disputed land couldn't take the heat. Came crashing down like a ton of bricks, right onto your neighbor's place across the way. But that's not the worst of it. No, that poor bastard's brand spanking new sports car was parked right in the line of fire. Got smashed to smithereens like a beer can at a frat party. Thank the Almighty no one was in it at the time, or there'd be hell to pay. Cleanup took damn near a week, and just when you thought you could catch your breath, bam! Here comes a bill in the mail, big enough to choke a horse. Over 200 grand, if you can believe it. More than your whole damn house and land put together. Turns out, Mr. Fancy Pants Insurance Company is hot to trot to get their money back. And since that tree was on your property, they figure you're the one holding the bag. Now, where I come from, most homeowners' insurance won't cover the cost of fixing other folks' stuff. That's on you, buddy. And if your tree falls on someone's car, even if it's parked on the street, tough titty, says the kitty. Should have trimmed those branches before they got too big for their britches. So when you get that bill, you ring up the insurance company right quick. Explain to them, polite as can be, that the tree ain't on your land. They hem and haw, say they'll look into it. But you know they're just blowing smoke. Sure enough, a week later, there's another letter in your mailbox. And this time, they've got proof. A copy of your deed, with that damn tree circled in red like a bullseye, saying you've got 30 days to cough up the cash, or else they'll see your ass in court. Well, ain't that just a kick in the teeth? You try to reason with them again, tell them they've got it all wrong, but they're not having it. As far as they're concerned, somebody's got to pay the piper, and that somebody is you.